The night, the well roared. It was a busy night at the yawning portal, which is to say it was loud, crowded, suspiciously sticky, and only slightly less dangerous than the hole in the middle of the floor. The tavern was packed with gamblers, sailors, merchants, sellswords, drunks, adventurers, liars, and people who were several of those things at once. Tankards slammed. Dice rolled. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else sang too badly. At the center of it all yawned the great open well, descending into the dark throat of Undermountain below. Most people avoided staring into it. Most people were wise. Into this noise came 4 strangers. None of them together. None of them known to Waterdeep, and none of them aware that by the end of the night they would be spoken of as a group. The first was Sir Feathersworth, a kinku wizard with a crow-black face, and feathers so dark they seemed to pass through black and arrive somewhere near midnight blue. Their little pillbox hat, black leather robe, sandals fitted carefully around taloned feet, and quarterstaff gave them the look of a scholar, a wanderer, and perhaps a bird who had once overheard nobility and decided to improve upon it. The second was Tanith, a towering human woman built with the honest strength of fields, fences, oxen, and generations of hard work. She came barefoot, unarmed, and smelling faintly of fresh-cut grass and sweet manure. Waterdeep may have been full of blades, coin, and corruption, but Tanith carried herself like someone who knew that muscle, grit, and necessity could answer many problems. She had come to the city for coin, and quickly. Without it, her family's farm might be lost to men who had never planted a seed in their lives. The third was Terrapin, who was, by all reasonable accounts, difficult to reasonably account for. Small, round, pink, bright-eyed, and almost perfectly spherical, she looked like a tiny face story that had wandered off a nursery wall and into a tavern full of knives. A green pointed cap sat on her head, red feet carried her with surprising speed, and at her side she bore a short scimitar that seemed both adorable and immediately concerning. Her story remained a mystery, but her readiness did not. Last came an Aarakocra druid, brown-feathered and eagle-like, robed simply and carrying the quiet air of open skies and high places. They said little of where they had come from or why they had arrived, but sometimes that is how stories begin, not with explanation, but with presence. Durnan, the barkeep and master of the yawning portal, looked at these 4 strangers and made a decision with the calm authority of a man who had no interest in wasting furniture. "Sit together," he said. "Or stand. Or leave." And so they sat. They had barely begun their first round of ale when Waterdeep introduced itself properly. A bald thug named Krentz, tattooed with sinister eye-like markings and flanked by 2 goblin lackeys, started trouble with a half-orc woman named Yagra Stonefist. The party knew nothing but of guilds, grudges, or the criminal war simmering beneath the city streets. But it was plain enough that Krentz had come looking for a fight, and Yagra looked like someone who had been disappointing such men for years. The first punch landed. The tavern erupted. Chairs scraped. Mugs spilled. And half the room leaned in with the hungry joy of people who had paid for ale and received theatre. The strangers did not stay strangers long. Sir Feathersworth's magic cut through the chaos, and suddenly Krentz collapsed into helpless laughter, rolling on the tavern floor as if the funniest joke in Waterdeep had crawled into his skull and locked the door behind it. Durnan came over the bar with the weary efficiency of a man taking out trash, seized one of the goblins and threw him into a nearby table. Then Terrapin, tiny, round, and somehow deadly serious beneath that green cap, loosed an arrow with inspired mercy and questionable culinary engineering. The arrow had been driven into a loaf of bread to make it non-lethal, and it struck Krentz hard enough to end both his laughter and his evening ambitions. A bread arrow. Waterdeep would remember that. Almost before the fight had truly begun, it was over. Durnan hauled Krentz and his goblins to the door and tossed them into the street on their ears. Yagra Stonefist, still proud and still pretending she had required no assistance whatsoever, looked over the table of unlikely rescuers. "You fought well," she said. "Not that I asked for your help, or needed it. It was almost a pleasant moment." Then the well roared. The ropes around the great shaft snapped taut. A sound rose from below, wet and furious and far too large. The laughter in the tavern died. Dice stopped rolling. The bard lost the thread of his song. A huge green claw slapped onto the stone rim. Then a troll dragged itself up out of under mountain. It was all long arms, warty flesh, black hair, yellow teeth, and honey. Bloated sturges clung to its body, fat with stolen blood, while others buzzed free into the room like winged needles. Panic broke loose. Patrons screamed and scattered. Tables overturned. Someone dove behind the bar. Someone else tried to save his drink first. The bard, poor soul, became the evening's least fortunate musician when a sturge dropped him bleeding to the floor. Durnan drew steel. Tanith answered with rage. She charged the troll directly, bare feet against tavern doors, fury against monster flesh, farm strength against unbroken horror. The troll struck back and bloodied what she held. Around her, the others moved with sudden purpose. Feathersworth's spells flashed through the air. Terrapin's arrows found their marks. The Aarakocra druid joined the defense, and together they tore into the swarm of sturges before those awful little blood drinkers could feast on more of the room. Durnan did what Durnan apparently does. Blow by blow, Durnan drove the monster back toward the well. The troll shrieked, staggered, and fell backward into a well that, despite appearing to be a bottomless abyss only moments ago, was inexplicably full of water.
But where'd all that water suddenly come from, then?
No claw reappeared. No warty hand gripped the stones. No furious green head rose again to trouble the tavern. At least, not tonight. Then a voice from somewhere in the room shouted,
"Aye! Who stopped the music, then?"
In the name of our sacred twisted sister, you are revivified.
And as the cheers began to rise, as spilled ale spread beneath boots and gamblers argued over bets, a finely dressed man in a feathered hat began pushing his way through the crowd toward them. He was smiling. Of course he was smiling. Because in Waterdeep, surviving one disaster is usually just how the next one finds you.